Welcome to Why Such a Fuss, an exciting new channel dedicated to help individuals and businesses to learn more about data protection in a way that is easy and engaging. I'm Christina from CVG Solutions, and I am a fully qualified data protection professional. I am passionate about educating, empowering, and enabling businesses to thrive. Remember to like and subscribe to this channel and help us to spread the word. Data protection is there for a reason. It protects you, your family, loved ones, customers, employees from coming to harm through the use of personal data. So make sure you click subscribe. Now, get ready to embark on a journey of growth and knowledge as we dive into the world of data protection. Wow, today we have a new guest on the show. I have invited Jonathan Cozens, who is the author of Clarity Driven, a book that I really enjoyed reading. Welcome to the show, Jonathan. And would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself and really what prompted you to write the book? And most importantly, what is the book about?
Hey, good morning, and thanks for having me on the podcast. It's really great to be here. So the inspiration for the book was when I was running an IT services company, and I realized that there was some problems with management decision making that I couldn't quite put my finger on, and I needed to research this. I made some mistakes when I launched the business in terms of I was absolutely sure that everybody would want my services, and all of the evidence said yes, but actually people were not that fussed about IT services, and I was confused. I couldn't understand why. And then once I started looking at this, I realized that actually in business, decisions tend to get made for reasons other than evidence-based. So people will just go, well, look, I know this to be true. I want this to be true. And they don't necessarily look at the data that would support whether it's true or not. And that was true of me. I made that blunder. So I thought, well, this feels like a trend. This feels like a widespread issue that I can talk to. And so I wrote the book all about how to make evidence-based decisions. I explore the business startup journey and why the decisions you make before you launch are very different to the ones you have to make after you launch. And I also look in some detail about where you find the information you need to support good decisions, which, as we've mentioned in the past, heads off into where does your business information come from, who's looking after it, how do you turn it into decision-making fuel, and so on.
Yes. Yeah, and that actually brings me to, as you're talking about decision making, one of the things that you touched in the book is the phrase that every business owner sort of hear is work on your business, not in your business. But which is correct. However, we all have different interpretation of its meaning. And what I like in the book is that it simplifies it. And actually, in the end, and quite rightly so, it boils down to decision making. And if we think about it, we all make decisions every day about our business. And one of the things that I like about that you tackle in the book is that it's easier to make a decision for the short terms, like tomorrow, next week, for example. But when it comes to making decisions that are much further into the future, then it's more difficult. And the reason for that is because we don't have the data. Back to what you were saying, we don't have the information to be able to make those decisions. And so in order to make those decisions, if we have to, we then make assumptions. And I love the fact that there is an entire chapter dedicated to assumptions, because again, it's something that very often it's not tackled correctly, because actually assumptions can be quite dangerous. And I think you explained that very clearly in the book. And as I was reading this particular chapter, I actually brought to mind a sort of a risk methodology that we used to use when I used to work at EDS, and it was called the ABCD methodology.
Okay.
And the reason I liked it is because instead of starting from the risk, like the normal standard risk management would do, you start with assumption. So you capture the assumption that you're making in the business, in a project, whatever, and you formulate them as a positive statement. And then you sort of assess how confident are you that the assumption is correct. If you are not confident and therefore it's a C or a D, that's where the ABC comes in, then actually you treat it as a risk. And so you move it to the risk page, and you then put in place mitigation plans to reduce the risk or even eliminate it. And so it's really interesting. And the general risk methodologies are missing something out. And by capturing and managing your assumptions, and you would then review them like you do a risk, okay, on a regular basis, it gives the business or the projects or whatever it might be better control. So one of the things that you also tackle in this particular chapter is how to stress test the assumption to determine whether it is true or not. Do you want us to tell us a bit more about that?
Well, sure. So long as you are willing to embrace the idea, I mean, when I say you, I mean any business leader, any business decision maker.
Yeah.
So long as you are comfortable with the idea that my decisions are based on some assumption, then to be fair to yourself and to be fair to the outcomes that you're looking for, it's in your interest to test that as widely as you can. And this is where having up to the minute accurate, comprehensive data at your fingertips, presented in a way that makes sense, makes all the difference. So if you're not making evidence-based decisions, if you're not using numerical data to support your assumptions, then your decisions are no better than guesses. They are typically highly emotionally charged, as I said earlier on, things that you want to be true, things that you believe must be true.
Yeah.
And the danger here is that believing yourself to be right feels great. It feels wonderful. You feel like you are the master of all you survey, and you are the king or queen of insight and so on. It's a great feeling, and it's very tempting to go, I'm brilliant because I'm right and everybody else is wrong. I get it. I've done it myself. I'm not proud of it, but there it is. When you can take all those things that you believe to be true and say, right, let's be honest here, let's be brutal, let's test it. Where is my supporting data? What does it show? Then you will get consistently reliable, better outcomes. It's as simple as that. Simply having one moment of insight, which may be counterintuitive, and I'm thinking of the old all of the various stories that go around Steve Jobs and his great leaps of intuition. Now, there's two things to say there. One is not everybody is Steve Jobs, and the other one is just because he was right a few times, does that mean he was right every single time? I guess we'll never know. But
no, but Steve Jobs was actually quite what's the word? Methodical person. So
sure.
he would have researched and researched and researched. So yeah, I think his assumption would have been tested.
Absolutely. But I mean, again, to take the best example, when again, I understand that this story may have some apocryphal elements, but the story goes when he went to Xerox PARC and saw the not the Macintosh, what was it? But he saw the work that they were doing on the graphical user interface. He said, right, stop that, stop with the Apple computers that we're making at the time. We're going to stop everything we're doing. We're going to go with this graphical interface because I believe it's the right thing to do. I believe it's the right way. It's the way forward. And he was correct. He was absolutely spot on. But he might have been wrong. There was no data available to say, this is the way we need to do things from now on.
No.
And there's an element of confirmation bias as well, because of course, those stories are the ones that we recognize. Oh, Steve Jobs was right, and therefore that's a valid way of taking great leaps in the dark. We tend not to hear about the ones that didn't work out.
Mm.
So when you are trying to make a decision, and particularly if you are trying to make a decision that's based on some outcome you want further in the future than like tomorrow or next week, you need to be honest to yourself and to be honest to the outcomes that you are looking for. You need to be robust. You need to be rigorous. You need to be saying, where is my information? How good is my information? How reliable, how timely, how comprehensive? Because there's a lot that's riding on this decision being correct.
Mm. Yeah, and quite rightly you touched on, on data, which it's another chapter that really hit the spot for me. And in fact, the title of the chapter is Data, the Lifeblood of Your Business. And that could not be any more true because data is critical for any business. And in fact, if you think about it, it's the only thing that a business cannot afford to lose. You can lose your employees, you can lose all sorts, but not your data. And during an organization life, the organization will collect and will produce various type of data, finance, I don't know, marketing, sales, strategic, and of course, personal data. And so all of these then needs to be protected from unauthorized access, unauthorized disclosure, losses, or even misuses, and so on. Obviously, my expertise is in GDPR and data protection, and so the focus is on personal data, so that kind of data. However, all of the other data type that I've mentioned still needs to be equally protected. And again, GDPR clearly gives obligations to organization to implement technical and operational security measures. What kind of security measures would you recommend a business to have, Jonathan, with your IT sort of hat on?
So the interesting thing for me is, and I'm glad you mentioned IT there, because data security is not a technology function. It's really not. It's a management function.
Mm.
And what typically happens in business is when people think about data, they think about technology. And when they think about technology, they go, right, the IT team can take care of that, whether it's your own team or whether it's an outsourced service provider. But that's missing the point. It's missing the fundamental point. Your data is, or at least the protection of your data, is a management function. It's a management responsibility. And so, to answer your question, what I would say is that the technical side of it and the backups and all of that horrible, messy technology stuff, all of that is driven from policy, and policy is a management role.
Mm.
So, for example, one of the topics that I explore in the book is backups, right? Not the physical, not the where's it stored and is it on disk or whatever. I mean, nobody cares. It's not important so long as it's backed up. But it's the policy set around backups that's the interesting thing, because management will be held responsible for having information ready to recall if they need it. So, for example, how often do you back up your data? Forget what the data is. It's not important. How often do you back up your data? That's a fairly simple idea to get hold of. Do you do it once a day? Well, okay. Why did you decide once a day was enough? What information did you use to say once a day to back up all of our information is enough? I
Yeah.
mean, so to take an example, supposing it's your backups run at 5 o'clock every day, boom, on the nose. And everybody's going, oh, see, look at that. We backed up every single day. And then at 5 to 5, you get some horrible catastrophic system failure and a whole day's work is lost because the last backup you took was from 5 o'clock yesterday. So, and there's various ways of iterating on that, but the point is that it was a management decision that said backups once a day is enough. Clearly, well, bear this in mind. If you lost a day's work from 3 years ago, you might go, well, oof, okay, whatever, it's not a disaster. But losing today's work is a disaster.
Yeah.
The most recent work that you've been doing is the most valuable. So you might say, well, okay, let's back up 4 times a day. Now we're more secure. And that's a good thing to do. But now you've got 4 times that amount of information to store and index and make retrievable, which has a cost. And that cost has to be accounted for, which is a management function. So my guidance for business leaders is always information management, information security. You cannot hand that off to your technology people. You can't. Or if you do, you're inviting disaster. You have to make management-based, business-based decisions around the risk of data loss versus the cost of data retention and so on. Because if the worst happens, you're going to have to live with the consequences of those decisions.
Yes. And this is music to my ears because you're correct. It is a management function. The amount of time that I've come across organizations where they say, in terms of data protection, we've got it all covered, it's with the IT department. You can't pass the buck. The accountability, the decision making is with the leadership. And again, what I see is that they often only focus on what is called the technical security measures, your backups, your antivirus, your cybersecurities. I mean, those are critical, don't get me wrong, and they're absolutely needed. But what about the operational security measures like pseudonymization and anonymization, which they should be embedded within the processes of the business? Again, that is a management decision that has been decided. We're just going to focus on the technical security, is the IT responsibility, off they go. And then when things go wrong, they wonder why, what happened. And that actually brings me to another topic that you cover in the book, which is business strategy. So you talk about scope and horizon within the book. And I totally believe, and it's not just a belief, it's a proof that actually data protection should be part of a business strategy. But before we go into that, I wanted, if you could, expand a little bit more on the scope and the horizon, because I thought when I was reading it, I thought that is actually quite fascinating subject.
Okay, so the best way to capture this is very simply, scope is how much of the business any given decision affects. And horizon is how long that decision needs to be true for. So to take one end of the scale, supposing you're running a business and somebody goes sick, they ring in sick, and so you need to get somebody else in. Okay. Now, you just made a decision who to pull in because they weren't busy or you had them on standby or whatever. But you just made a decision that says, right, this person has gone sick and therefore we need somebody else and this is who it's going to be. Now, that decision has very limited scope and a very limited horizon. It only needs to be true for one day, and it only needs to be true for one person, or perhaps two people. Whereas at the other end of the scale, when you are setting up your business, when you're just going, look, I've got to launch a venture doing this thing because this thing is worthwhile to do, or it's going to make me rich or whatever, it doesn't really matter. When you are making those early, grand, blue sky, big thinking, big picture decisions, those actually have infinite scope and infinite horizon. In as much as when you say, right, I've got to launch a business doing something, that decision affects the whole of the business and it affects the whole of the business forever. So where I'm going to with the whole scope and horizon concept is that the more scope and the more horizon any given decision has, the more robustly you need to test the assumptions that support that decision. I mean, to take a very silly example, it's a negative example because I just wanted to illustrate the point. So, and again, it comes from the book. Supposing I said, right, look, the thing that really bothers me, right, the thing that really drives me, it motivates me, is the fact that after a rainstorm, snails tend to get stepped on the pavement. They're going across the pavement because it's wet and they can get there and people step on them. I think that's terrible, right? I think that's awful. And I'm going to do something about it. This is my business vision. I'm invested in snail safety, and I'm going to start a business painting snail shells high-vis yellow and making cute little crash helmets for them, right? Now, bonkers, right? It's insane. Nobody would ever do that. But why would they never do that? Not partly because there's no business there. You might be massively invested in snail safety, or I might be massively invested in snail safety. And it matters to me, but nobody else cares. So there's no business, right? And where I'm going with all of this is that my big assumption is that everybody else will care, or at least enough other people will care about snail safety to make a business out of it. They are prepared to pay me to paint snail shells high-vis yellow and make the cute little crash helmets. And so what a lot of businesses do is they never test the big assumption. They get some great sense of mission, right, this is a worthwhile thing, we're going to go and do it. But they never test the big assumption, which is, do enough other people see a better world the way I do that they'll pay me to make it true?
Yeah.
So yeah, scope and horizon starts big. And if you are paying attention, if you are really investing in business strategy, it will stay big. It's very easy to just get smaller and smaller and smaller. You know, we're up and running now. We're making money and people are buying stuff and so on. I only have to worry about the smaller stuff now, the tactical decisions, the short scale stuff, the limited scope, limited horizon. But actually, that's not really true. Delegate that, automate it, whatever it takes. Mm-hmm. If you are owning the business, if you are founding and running the business, I would contest that the value you bring is based in your ability to make high scope, long horizon decisions.
Yes. And actually, you know, as you were talking, I was sort of thinking, we are putting together a business strategy. We're talking about strategies, which also then means, you know, reviewing your initial business plan when you first started your business, which then means making assumptions because you're making, you know, long-term decision. And it's kind of, you know, the cycle repeats. It's a constant cycle. But at the foundation of all of it, it's assumptions. And so it's really, really important to, like you say, you know, stress test them. I mean, I really, really enjoyed reading the book. It flows. It's easy to read. It's not heavy at all. And just wanted to remind the audience that it's called Clarity Driven, which can be purchased on Amazon, I believe, Jonathan, and is also now available on bookstores. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
And is now on his second edition, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, the initial print run sold out mostly on pre-orders, which was a lovely thing to happen.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent. So, and one of the other things that I noticed in the book is that it clearly, or in my mind, it clearly split the book into two sections. Although, you know, although it flowed, there is a constant flow. There isn't like a blank page in between. But as I was reading it, you can see that the second half of the book, it changes angle. So the way I can explain it for me is that in the first part or the first half of the book is very much focused on the why. while instead the second half of the book is much more focused on the what, the practical element.
Yes.
Would you say that is correct, that I sort of interpreted correctly?
It's absolutely spot on. So the best way to illustrate that is if you can imagine a pyramid, and the top of the pyramid is your ability to make decisions, which is the highest responsibility of a business management team. Right? That's what you're for. That's how you deliver value. But in order to make good decisions, you need good data. So if you can imagine the next layer down on the pyramid being your business data, which is, of course, what we've been talking about. But your business data comes out of something. It doesn't just invent itself. And certainly once you've been trading a while, your business data comes out of your business processes, the way that you do what you do. But if you are running your business in a smart and scalable way, your business processes probably won't live on bits of paper. They'll live in software. But of course, your software itself needs to live in IT systems. It needs to live in hardware. So this is how the pyramid builds up. If you have decision making as the goal, as the gold at the top, that comes out of business data, that comes out of business process, that comes out of software, that comes out of IT systems, the top bit of the first part of the book is about the first two chunks of the pyramid: decision making and business data. But you can't have those unless you have well documented processes living in software, living inside some hardware somewhere. And so the second part of the book is a management guide to managing those technology functions. It does not, it's not beyond the scope of a non-technical manager. It's specifically written for non-technical people. But it does give you an awareness and a set of tools to help you manage your technology function effectively. You can outsource the actual doing of it or do it in-house, or I talk about that in some detail. But what the second half of the book is all about is to help management teams understand why any of the hardware, why any of the software, why any of these expensive, fragile, gnarly, horrible technical systems. Why do we bother? What's the point? And once you get the point, you go, okay, fair enough. These are the things that I need to know to manage them effectively.
Yes. Yes, and we'll explore the second half of the book in maybe more details in future episodes. So stay tuned for the next episode with Jonathan Cozens. Jonathan, before we go, would you like to let the audience know how to get in touch with you?
Absolutely, yes. So I'm sure there'll be links and such, but the best way to do it is look me up on LinkedIn. It's just Jonathan Cozens on LinkedIn. And again, the book is available through Amazon and Waterstones. And I hear from my publishers that there are a number of other retailers that are going to pick it up as well. So you might even see it on a shelf somewhere soon. Probably with me standing right by it going, hey, look, there it is. It really, but not my proudest moment, but I may not be able to help myself.
Oh, wow. That would be amazing, Jonathan. I want a signed copy.
Oh, we can definitely make that happen.
Jonathan, thank you ever so much for joining me on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm looking forward to another one. In the meantime, if any of you would like to get in touch with me, you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search for CVG Solutions, or alternatively, just email me at info@cvgsolutions.co.uk. Thank you for listening.